a video, so if you want to do the video, you got it.
You know how?
Yeah, I got it on right now.
It's on right now. Here we go. I'm gonna come sit over here so I can see across.
Okay,
With
so,
just
okay.
real quick, the cockroaches on the walls
Cover
of
your
the
head.
VA might have been about the same time that the rat tails were hanging out of the ceiling on the wards in Fubai. So the government hasn't taken care of veterans very well on either end.
Where's this?
Was in Fubai in Vietnam.
Fubai, yeah.
The hospital was an old Marine barracks, and we could see the rat tails in the ceiling. You emptied urinals into
They
a
were
bucket.
attached to rats, okay.
No, you can eat those.
Were you a nurse? Well, let me go, because we're gonna end up going on here. I'll tell you, most of my filming is almost, because we're gonna do it shortly, we're gonna each of us talk short.
Right.
It keeps cutting out on me because my battery's gonna go dead. But I just wanted to say that, I'm a Vietnam veteran, 1968. I joined the military like everybody. Most people 19 years old didn't know shit about what was going on in Vietnam. I couldn't find it on the map if you told me about it, And I had also sort of a poverty draft in a sense too. The draft was coming. I just wanted to get in, get it over with, and get out. I didn't care about the war. I wasn't even conscious about what it was all about. Ended up in the Marine Corps, trained as a machine gunner. Went AWOL out of boot camp, mainly just to go say goodbye to family, because we just figured, we're going to Vietnam. We don't know whether we're going to live or die. So that was the only reason me and another guy went there. 4 days home, sent back, captain's mast thrown in the brig for 30 days. Captain comes in and says, you guys want to get out early? You sign this paper to go to Vietnam. Of course, we're going to go anyhow. So we sign that and get out of the brig, go to Vietnam. We're both separated. He goes to one company. I end up in Fubai. Come in and fly into Da Nang. We have a sergeant who's going to come and pick me up. There's the very day I stepped into Da Nang, right off the airport, the incoming came in. You can be in Vietnam one day and you're dead. You can be dead. That people have to understand. It's not how long you were there. It's that you were there. And that came in, and we didn't know what happened. Everybody disappeared. And we're just standing there with, looking around trying to figure it out. Somebody blew the whistle and said, come on into a bunker. We go into the bunker, and it was over in a few minutes. But I thought we were going to die at that very moment. Then our sergeant comes by to pick me up, and takes me and another guy who was just coming back from R&R, go to our base. Typhoon comes in. And the Typhoon, they dropped us off in between because it was too muddy to take us. Where they dropped us off, there was a number of Agent Orange barrels around in that area. I knew nothing about Agent Orange. I knew nothing about all of this stuff. I'm also a machine gunner in Vietnam. I was in the jungle. I was never in any city. I was sleeping in mud puddles, sleeping in the jungle, rats and stuff walking over us at night. And one of the things that I was on a search and destroy mission, and there's parts of that I can't remember. I remember we actually had a mutiny in the field. Partly it may have been my fault starting it off, because we had been humping around for a few days, ran out of food and water, and I was having heat exhaustion. And I said, hey, we got to stop. They said no. I took my machine gun and threw it down the hill. The sergeant came by, the lieutenant came running back down, threw me down the hill after the gun. I cleaned it up. We get up on the plateau, and on the plateau, we were supposed to move on, and everybody said no. And so they ordered us. Everybody gave them the middle finger salute. They stopped. He ordered the sergeant to pick me up. The first guy that picked me up, Matt, really there? to go down this path. He goes down this path, the jungle grass goes right behind him, stepped on a mine and killed him. So when that happened, you know, nobody, they couldn't get us to budge. They had to call in, a colonel flew in on a helicopter in the middle of the field, and he gave us this rah-rah speech and said, we gotta continue with our mission. Everybody gave him the middle finger salute. He called in the jungle, hot food, chow, beer, cigarettes, in the middle of all that. And we're sitting there drinking and eating while they're taking this body bag out. And we're looking over at this little village, and in that village, we're seeing a Phantom jet laying out napalm across this rice paddies and stuff. And eventually we have to go over there. And I remember going through the rice paddies. My squad followed behind me. Other guys were walking on the dikes. Those guys are walking on the dikes. I hear an explosion, a scream, an explosion, scream. And then I don't remember. I mean, I stepped over a number of booby traps. And then I don't remember what happened. And I remember just being picked up and taken back to our base in a convoy. And I remember telling that story because I was proud that I remember I never fired my weapon in Vietnam, you know? And I was telling that to a bunch of kids at college, and all of a sudden, I started shaking, I started crying, I could barely hold myself up. It took another Marine to come by and hold me up. And then I realized there's something that I don't know what happened in that village. We could have done a My Lai massacre. Or it may be just the trauma of all those guys dying, you know. I don't know what it is. So I go to therapy through the vet center once a month. Actually, when I leave here on Saturday, I'll be going to see a young 9/11 veteran Marine who's my therapist and understands what this is all about and supports our work that we're doing. So that's something I deal with all the time. That's a continuation dealing with that. When I first came home, like everybody else, I put that the military on the shelf. I didn't want to talk about it. I didn't want anything to do with anything that had the government, or you had to sign a paper. Yeah. Even to this day, and when I had to eventually file for benefits, I couldn't do it. I can't fill out that paperwork because I was betrayed by that paperwork. I was betrayed, and so I had to go to a VSO office. You know, people need to know that if you can't do it, there's people there that will help you get your benefits, and will fill out that paperwork for you. Do the research that you need. Get your papers that you need to prove that you were in Vietnam, that these certain things happened. And they helped me get that. I could sign it, but I still to this day can't fill those things out. So that's part of my post-traumatic stress. But I'm also an Agent Orange victim because when I got married and we had a child, we didn't have a child for about 7 years. My son was born with congenital heart disease, cleft palate, stomach abnormalities. And you know, we're working for Lamaze and all this natural birthing. We did everything you're supposed to do. And when my child was born, all of a sudden the doctors are sitting there talking, whispering, and then finally come out and say, we think there's something wrong. And just as they're beginning to try and explain it to it, my son has a seizure. They got to rush him up to what they call Dornbecker Children's Hospital. And it's our first child. We don't even know what's going on, so we were scared to death of what's going to happen, right? And eventually, he was in there for a while till we kind of learned that he's going to have cleft palate surgery. He had a heart problem, which was they called tetralogy of Fallot, a hole in the heart and a stenosis in his pulmonary artery, which meant he's not getting oxygen very well. Actually, the hole in the heart actually helped the blood flow, so they got oxygen. But he had what we call purple lips, blue lips. But we knew he was going to have surgery over and over. Eventually, I had a daughter a year later, and she was perfectly healthy. They grew up like normal children. eventually, but Casey had to go have all these doctors, was on phenobarbital for a long time, and then we weaned him off. And so the prognosis was good. We had the best surgeon in the world that was gonna do his heart surgery, Dr. Albert Starr, who actually was, did heart valves. He invented these things. And I was so worried about all this. I'm an artist, so I started studying biological illustration just so I could understand what this was all about, you know, so I could see what was happening, and I wanted to know how I could do, you know, be prepared to talk to the doctors about what was happening. And eventually, Casey had to go for his heart surgery. He was 3 years old in 1981, and he went to, we thought it was going to be perfect. He was in operation for over, well, I should say, before he went in, okay, they brought Casey out. I basically said, I tried to call it off. I said, I just don't trust it. I don't feel good about this, you know, not now, not today. And so they brought psychologists down and therapists to talk to me. My wife's saying, you know, Casey really needs this. He's having pain in his legs. He can't breathe very well. And they just, it's normal for parents to have this fear. So I had that fear, and they eventually convinced me this had to be done. And I remember Casey going through these steel doors with his hands out to me going, "Daddy, Daddy, Daddy." And as those doors closed, it took me out, the image I had was that sergeant that went down that field and got hit by the mine and died in Vietnam. 12 hours later, they come to us and tell us that something went wrong in surgery. Casey had an oxygen shock to the brain. He went into a coma for 7 weeks. My wife and I were with him every day at his bedside. She was holding him on the last day, and she was handing him off to me. And he took a deep breath and died in my arms. Well, that was, you know, an experience the whole world fell out from under me. God, the world, everything. I was fed up with it all. And if it wasn't for my wife and having a daughter, I wouldn't be here talking to you today. And so what happened after that, and I told that to a few people here just a little while ago, is family took me to, took my daughter to babysit, and they sent my wife and I to the coast to just grieve. And I had this out-of-body experience. And with this out-of-body experience, I traveled through time, through all these wars, from the present war that I had been in, to every single war in history, till I came back to this sort of Adam and Eve story, where Eve is holding her dead son, Abel, yeah, holding Abel in her arms, who was killed by his own brother, Cain. And all of a sudden, you know, Eve lets out this silent, powerful scream, and the God trembled, the universe shook, the angels began to cry, and they filled the oceans, and the oceans started lapping at my feet, brought me back to reality. And then I thought how deep my grief was, as deep as the oceans that had just been lapping at my feet. And I thought, what about those Vietnamese families? What about their grief? What about the people, 4 million people we killed? What about their families, their mothers, their brothers, and their sisters? These are our brothers, and we're killing our own brothers and sisters in these wars, one right after the other. And I said, I can no longer be a part of it. That's why I became a veteran for peace. But Agent Orange became a real issue. I had diabetes because of this, hearing problems, and so I would not go to the VA till, I probably didn't go to the VA till 2008. Wow. 2008, I